Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar introducing Sentinel LDK 8 and discussion around business continuity at the moment and some of the new features that LDK 8 is bringing to the market. We're expecting the webinar to last around about 1 hour, and we will record this session, and we will send this to you via email. And we'll also make all of the slides available to you as a separate download. During the webinar, you should be able to see on your panel that there's a question box. So we're happy to for you to put questions in, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So my name is Jamie Longmuir. I'm a regional sales director here based in the UK in Reading for our software monetization division at Thales. Joining me and who will be presenting the more technical side of things and going through a lot more of the functionality of LDK 8 is Sven Feierstein, who's based in Munich. He is regional manager for our sales engineering team and looks after a number of our customers across Northern Europe. So we will be the ones speaking and hopefully answering any questions that you may have. So just a quick one on the agenda. So for today, we're going to be giving you a quick introduction around Thales. Some of you have probably seen our name a few times, but some of you may not know what Thales does. So a very brief introduction to that. And then we'll hand over to Sven, go through the feature highlights for LDK 8, talking about LDK as a service, how we can look at Docker and cloud licensing, some new features, and we'll go into more detail around those updates. Sven will then do an online demo so you can see this working in real time, and then we'll run through our Q&A at the end. I hope that fits for everyone. So on to Thales. You probably, many will have known that or dealt with us for many years as a variety of names. We were originally SafeNet many years ago and were acquired by Gemalto, and just last year we were acquired by Thales. So we're now part of a huge organisation, a 19 billion euro business with 80,000 employees, offices in pretty much every country you can think of, and a huge self-funded R&D division. So this brings us, great opportunity for us as a business, great investment for our products and our platform, and resources to us. So, a really interesting acquisition, and we're very pleased to be part of the Thales group. So in terms of markets, some of you may know a little bit about Thales, some of you have no idea. Really, they're probably most well known in the defense and security space. They work in many different verticals, but really defense and security is probably where most people have heard the name. And this ranges from everything from sort of underwater sonar platforms through to, defense and missile guidance systems. If we look into ground transportation, they specialize in things like train systems and network infrastructure for ground transportation. In aerospace, Thales specializes in avionics and air traffic control systems, connectivity in aeroplanes, both civil and military aviation. Space is a really interesting subject. I think this is a really fascinating subject myself, but Thales design and build and operate a lot of satellites and satellite-based systems, and these range again from sort of common GPS systems that you know and love, through to things like climate tracking and using satellites for more environmental functions. And finally, Gemalto, is now formed this new digital identity and security business. So the entire Gemalto business is a new, is now called DIS, and software monetization sits within this digital and identity and security business. So that's a very brief overview of Thales, and obviously very happy to pass on any further information should you want it. From our perspective in the world of software monetization, we're still the global market leader in SM. We have around 450 employees globally, and we support our clients old and new. We are continuing to work with what we would call traditional software companies, and of course we now work with a lot of what we call non-traditional software companies, so companies that are building devices and hardware and starting to either sell their hardware new ways around subscription and using feature-based licensing for hardware. So, you know, there's a real interesting mix today of the type of organizations that we work with and who are looking to protect their software and to grow their business in new ways. So our solutions, as I guess some of you will have already seen, really split into a number of different areas. And there are a number of different parts to our solution. So we help our customers really at the very basics around security and protection to prevent piracy and to protect their hardware and software assets with products like Sentinel Envelope and some of the high encryption things like in our hardware keys. From a licensing and usage perspective, we capture and enforce many of these different license models, and to ensure that you and your customers are staying compliant and that you're getting you know, best value from your customers, that you're able to issue the licenses, be able to track and monitor that, and to ensure that your customers are only using the software that they've purchased and are not consuming more than they've purchased. A significant growth area for us is around entitlement management. This has really become very key as new business models have started to take precedence in the market. You know, when we're dealing with things like perpetual licenses, where you just issue one license and the customer's quite happy for the next 1, 2, 3 or 4 years, we now look at things like subscription, where we may be issuing sort of monthly updates. Suddenly the volume of transactions is going up very, very significantly. I'm sure some of you will be experiencing that in your own environments. So the world of entitlement management is starting to take a forefront in many ways, and being able to put some automation around the license process to be able to connect this to your back office systems is really becoming quite key today. So this is a real area of interest for everyone, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And lastly, this is really really complemented by our professional services team. So we have a global professional services team that really look at 2 different aspects. One is what we call advisory consulting, so helping our customers to plan and install and look at licensing and entitlement management for their business. And the second is really around some you know, key development work, so building connectors and you know, building sort of enhanced portals, etc., etc. So it's a little bit of a mix, but generally it's around the advice and guidance, and really that supports all of our customers in trying to get the best from licensing entitlement and to grow their business in new directions. So in terms of protection, and specifically with this webinar, we'll be focusing on our LDK product and the latest version of LDK, which is version 8. But LDK has traditionally been used by our small to mid-size enterprises who are looking for an out-of-the-box experience. And LDK is designed to address this space with a variety of different protection types. Most traditionally and most well known is probably the hardware key. And this is now really been augmented for many years with software-based licensing, and today we'll be introducing a new LDK cloud licensing platform. So many of you will be familiar with the hardware key and the advantages and the use cases that addresses, and some of you will have moved away from hardware keys or have a mixed estate of both hardware keys and software-based licensing. And really one of the key advantages when we talk about software-based licensing is the reduced need to physically ship anything. And so recently with COVID and with the challenges of things like virtual environments, and this is where we start to see, you know, things like cloud licensing starting to play a really key part going forward. So I think it's important that we have to really acknowledge the current situation that we're in. The recent pandemic has forced change upon us all. With social distancing and reduced travel, and indeed, you know, many more of us working from home, you know, full time and for the foreseeable future. So this has brought, you know, a number of challenges for ourselves personally, I'm sure for you as well, but also for your customers. And this has brought many, I guess, traditional licensing programs to the fore. It's highlighted some limitations potentially. So the ability to be able to offer your products more flexibly, but still protected, is still a very high priority, and the ability to reduce, you know, distribution times of things like hardware keys to keep your customers productive is an ongoing challenge. So we believe that some of this new capability in LDK 8 will help you to address and overcome some of these limitations. So this is really where a lot of this is this was coming anyway, and I think the pandemic has really sort of highlighted that in particular. So last slide from me before I hand over to Sven. So really, in light of COVID-19 and the licensing challenges this has brought, we're pleased to introduce LDK version 8. This is the latest version of LDK. Just wanted to really highlight a couple of key points. So one, the ability to enable software and cloud-based licensing to reduce your reliance on physical keys, really key, but also high levels of security and trust that you've traditionally known and had. And this also offers the creation of we also have a new service called LDK as a service. This is a fully managed service that Thales will host and manage your LDK instance with full online access, making it easy for you as a business to really focus on managing your own products and your own clients and your own licensing scheme. So we take away this the need for an on-premise LDK server. And again, due to COVID, lots of offices have been closed, including ours. None of us have been in a Thales office for many months now. So this has caused, I know, a few problems for people. So LDK as a service has started to show some interest, and it's a new service that we've just launched. And then really for your customers, this greater flexibility for new licensing schemes, to be able to access license even if they're not in the office, and being able to do this over the net, and to reduce the need to have to accept things like physical key deliveries has become quite important. So really I'll hand over to Sven now, who will go into considerably more detail around some of these key features. Again, if you have questions, please do highlight them in the question box. But I'll hand over to Sven, and we'll catch up again after his demo, and we'll run through the Q&A. Thank you, Sven.
Thank you, Jamie. Good morning to everyone. Nice greetings from the sunny Munich today. Yeah, as Jamie already mentioned, my name is Sven Feuerstein, and I'm a sales engineer. Means we are the technical part from our sales team. I want to have talking about the technical parts of the new functionalities and the changes we introduced with Sentinel LDK 8.0. As Jamie already mentioned, we now have the LDK as a service. I want to talk a little bit about our new Docker support, and of course, and this will be the main for our hands-on with the new cloud-based licensing we offer. Let's start with LDK EMS as a service. So EMS as a service we already have for a couple of years, but now we are able to import or to serve existing customers. So you are able to, if you're already an LDK customer, to completely import database to our as a service offering. And this is running on AWS. We do all the stuff needed. We are running daily backups. We are responsible for updating operating system. Of course, LDK versions will be updated. Yeah, we are also certificated with ISO, SOC 2, and of course GDPR certificated. Yeah, for you, there's no big change for using EMS as a service. Only thing changed is the URL you log into. And yeah, then you are ready to go with the solution. Of course, if someone has already implemented any back office automation, stuff like that, this can be used as well. Only thing to do is to change then the URL. We do offer all the web services from LDK on-premise, of course, in EMS as a service as well. As I already said, why should some of you consider to go with EMS as a service. As I said, we do all the managing. We have 99.5% of availability. You have a clear cost plan. Yeah, you really know what it costs. You don't need to care about anything. And especially when you think about going with software licenses, you need to consider that customers want to be able to activate a license whenever they want. So Docker is a high requested functionality. I just want to give you a small overview about Docker, why our customers have such a big demand that we support Docker. In this case, we do not support Docker for LDK shipment. So for the EMS, we mean here with the Docker support, the licensing enforcement, yeah, that we can now offer for Docker. Docker is very, very fast growing. I have a lot of discussions with customers for Docker support. Why is this? I have a very nice and clear separation of applications or instances. It's very easy for a software vendor to do the tests and then to deploy software to customers or on as a service offering by the vendor themselves. As soon as Docker is available for an operating system, it is more or less sure that it will run then in these Docker containers there. And yeah, it is very convenient for administrators to work and to scale applications if they are designed to do so. How do we support licensing in Docker? We have, maybe there are some more, but we want to go with 3 possible scenarios. The first one is that a Docker container is configured to have local access to a hardware key. This is already a very well-used way to deliver license managers with a hardware key. So you have the flexibility from a Docker container, but also the license security from an HL key, which is very nice. And of course, you can use then in the Docker container also network licenses if you are planning to deliver to your customer concurrency-based licenses. Option 2 is to have a dedicated and external license manager. Must not be a Docker. Yeah? As we know it today, you have a Linux, a Windows server, and you install the license manager and apply a hardware or software key or both, yeah, whatever you want. And the application with the or the Docker container with the application is then a network client to these license managers. With this, you can also easily control how many instances running at, let's say, customer side. Because as soon as you hand out a container, of course, the customer would be able to run as many of those instances as he wants to. Option 3 is kind of a mixture of it. Here we install or we deliver, of course, a license manager as a Docker container as well. But then to raise the license security, it's very important that we are now talking about the license security, the persistence, the include of such a license is then installed on a host, and this is simply the call how to do this. This is also mentioned in our manuals. That means that we assure that only one license manager per host is running with this given license, and we have a better clone protection for this if you don't want to ship out a hardware key. Why? Software vendors want to have cloud-based licensing, of course. Jamie already mentioned it. When you see the COVID-19 problematic, where all of a sudden it was, you were not able to plan it really. People needs to work from home. Then, of course, if you have licenses on premise at a customer's company, maybe there are in the beginning problems with the VPN connections, or if it's hardware key, then you need to ship them to the users, and this can be very time consuming, and of course it's a very, very big effort for this. With the cloud-based license, it is more that the license is following the user. So here you don't need to do an extra activation and bind a license to a host. We are working with the cloud-based licenses, what we are called identity, and then one identity can only once use such a license at a time. So the license usage is secure, and the customer can start it on separate machines, let's say during day in the company, in the evening, or a COVID situation, then also from home without the need to have the license persistently installed on his PC. So we have normally now 3 possible license deployments. Since years, we have, of course, a network license, which means that the customer side, custom company, a license manager is installed, license is activated or applied via a hardware key, and then users are consuming the license as they are allowed to do that. Then we have the standalone license manager. This means that you have the license installed on a target PC. So there is no need to have connection to a network license server, and the license is independent from any access. Now, the new functionality we have enhanced our license manager, as I already told, with the internet or with the cloud functionality. That means that you as an ISV can install a license manager on AWS or Azure or whatever you want. Then you are doing the activation in the name of your customers and hand out those identities to the users, and then they are able to consume the licenses. How to enable such a license. This is what I'm going to show you later on. I mentioned before that the cloud license, the identity-based license, is an enhancement. So this means that the basis or the basic is our normal license manager, as you maybe know it since years. And this also means that you don't need to change any of your code. What is needed is the actual enforcement API. So maybe you need to exchange the existing libraries with the actual ones, recompile, and then you're good to go. So you don't need to touch the code for using these new functionalities. Of course, also the envelope is fully supported for cloud-based licenses. The outcome or the protected software has access to the information needed, and then you have no problem again with using the cloud-based licenses with an enveloped program. Also, the the concept is that the license manager is typically hosted by the software vendor. So you have then the full control. You can manage each and everything. You apply the updates for the licenses, and the customer does not need to deal with any of the sometimes annoying license updates or license movements. Yeah, they have nothing to do with this anymore. This is running by you, and it's very easy for a customer then to be in compliance with the license terms they have bought. Yeah, some of the advantages, of course, the license is very mobile. As I mentioned, the license is following the user and it's not stick to a specific PC anymore. You can easily then license, virtualize the software, so you don't need to take care or you don't have the risk anymore that you may become a victim of cloning from an unhonest customer maybe. So then the application which is on virtual machines or even in Docker, this was the type 2 I showed you before, is then a simple client to a license manager in the cloud. And if you provided, let's say, 3 licenses, they can only use 3 licenses. And yeah, you are completely safe with your license you hand out then to the customers. It's very easy to implement. As I mentioned also before, you don't need to change anything in your code. It's simply a change in the way you deploy a license. And for the end customer, it's also very easy. I show you later on. What else is new in LDK 8.0? We have some very interesting and important enhancement for the envelope. We have also very, very much requests to support Python. Python is not really supported out of the box, but we have a sample that you can use, or that you can convert a Python script via Siphon then to an envelopable application. We also enhanced the support for .NET Core 3 and 2. We do now support also with the envelope the protection for those applications on Linux. We have also implemented the app on chip functionality. I don't know if you are all aware what this is. This means that you can run specific functions of your code on a hardware key, which makes it very, very hard to crack and to steal. This is something for those vendors who needs to have the hardest security preventing code theft or something like that. And we do support Java 11 applications right now. For our admin control center, not only the identity-based access is implemented in the ACC, it's also HTTPS support. So you can add certificates, SSL certificate for the communication with the browser to the admin control center. This is of course, needed as soon as you expose an admin control center in the cloud. You don't want anyone to make the changes from the admin control center you use for your cloud-based licensing. For Android, we do now support Android 10 with the API and the envelope. We support the license manager, the SL admin mode, now also for Linux on ARM, typically Raspberry Pi devices maybe. We have the possibilities to set an unlimited amount of activations, and with our new hardware keys, with our new generation of hardware keys, we can now use up to 392 kilobytes for the memory where you can store a certificate, any other information you maybe want to carry with a license on a hardware key. So now I need to switch to my VMs. In this case, I'm working always with virtual machines. I want to show you how we deal now with Docker and with software licenses. You all know the Sentinel EMS, and what is very important, of course, with software licensing and with cloud-based licensing is that you need to know how you protect yourself for cloning when someone is or maybe wants to clone the license. We have for virtual environments several of these clone detection types. We separate on physical machine and PM type and on virtual machines, and also VM Docker is a virtual machine from our perspective. So we introduced the VM type 4, which is for Docker and other virtual machines. So we have the technology to identify on which kind of VM we are running on, and then to bind a license the best possible way to specific information here. I have explanation added into the slide deck. It is not visible today. I don't want to annoy you too much with slideware. I just wanted to go into the product and show directly how you set up such VM types. What is also possible is that you create your own detection scheme. So you can choose by yourself which criteria are checked and how many of those criteria must fit that a license is still valid on a machine. So this brings you the maximum of flexibility to decide yourself about the flexibility of a license and the security of a license. Yeah. Now I want to show you in the admin control center what's new here. You know our admin control center, which is installed via the driver installation, and now you can activate the communication to the admin control center via HTTPS. I didn't do it here right now, but yeah, it's up to you to control it via HTTPS. And for this, you need then to point to the public and private key files. You can do local ones which are not recognized by the browser as I don't find the word, sorry, as secure, but then you can click on trusted, and then you can trust by yourself. This is really that no one can sniff and catch your password when you log in then to the admin control center. Now we come to the cloud functionality. So as soon as you want to create a license with this cloud functionality, you need then to configure the identities. It's very straightforward how to do this. You give the client a name, that you can separate them, that you can identify them, and then an identity string is created by the admin control center. You can control if this identity is allowed to use the license on the fly, and or is the identity allowed to detach a license. Some words about detaching. Detaching means that someone disconnect a license from a license server and store it locally on his PC. And this is for a amount of time. You can also control the maximum time. And this means that then such a customer do not need to be always online. Yeah, so as soon he is online once, he can detach the license and then work locally with this, with no need to have internet access anymore. And then he can return the license proactively, or when the time is over from the license, then it is deleted locally and it is available again on the license server. For a software vendor, it's of interest to limit then such a client identity to a specific key ID. This means the HASP ID. So we have here the 2700, and I deleted the license. But that means that you can activate licenses in the name of different customers. So you can kind of share several licenses for several identities on one license manager. And this is also to save costs, of course, because then you don't need to spin up an instance for each and every single customer. You can kind of share such a license. I now want you to show how it is really work. So I switch to a client virtual machine where I want to show you that, let's say we have something protected to the feature 100. I have prepared this in advance. Now there comes the message that it is protected by DemoMA. You maybe know all DemoMA, which is our batch code for testing and for evaluation, stuff like that. And now the license, or there is no license available for these for this customer, because I don't have added anything to here. So now what need you to do as a software vendor? You install such a license manager in the cloud, apply a license to it, and then you create a identity. You maybe see that I switched to a license manager, which is really installed in the cloud. This is not on my VM. It is not on our network here in the company. This is really available in the cloud with port 1947. And I already created a ID with my first name, and this is limited to a specific key, and I allow this identity to run on 3 machines. What does that mean? This means when I put in this identity to several PCs, maybe with the 4th PC, I would get a message that the amount of registered machines is reached, and then you can throw, or you can delete this machine from the list, and then the customer can simply reuse this identity string on the next machine. So here you are completely free about how many devices you want this ID to work with. I have already copied in here. So this is the only thing you need to give to your customer, to your user, to work with the license. Sorry. And all the customer needs to do then is to add on his local admin control center in the remote search parameters, then the ID. You see that the ID is created with a string, and then the target URL where the admin control center is installed. Now, after I clicked submit, hopefully it is working that fast, I can try to restart this application. This looks good. This takes a bit because it's not the fastest PC, but now you see that I got this license, and I can also check that I have really created a communication with the license, and this is my username from the machine, this is my machine name, and as soon as I stop the application, then of course the sessions are cleaned up. Maybe one nice thing I want to show you, I mentioned before that we now are supporting Linux on ARM for the admin control center, and this is on a Raspberry Pi 3. It's not the newest one. Oh, here we are. And you see this is good enough for having licenses in the cloud. And that's it for my hands-on right now. And you see, I did not activate any licenses on this PC. It is simply by adding the identity string in the license manager from my local installation. And I don't need to deal with the fingerprints, with activation, stuff like that. It's only copy paste the ID string in here, and I'm good to go. Jamie, can I hand over to you?
Thank you. You can. So just one or two more slides, and then we'll go into the Q&A. We do have some questions. So thank you, Sven. That was a really useful demo. I hope you all found that of interest. We've added some additional information here. This will obviously be in the slide deck when we send it out. A number of tutorials, some webinar recordings on some of our latest conversations around software licensing and the way you look at products. If you don't have it or access to it yet, there is obviously the support portal and online documentation to help with you looking at some of this technology in a bit more detail. So they're there to browse at your leisure. Next slide, Sven. I think that's the last one. And yes, really, it's an offer from us here to you guys, additional help. So, you know, we are here to help. We want you to be successful with our technology. We're here and available to offer a variety of advice and guidance, etc. Whether it's around distribution, so whether you need some support for training and migration and moving to some of these new technologies, whether you need to look at the way you purchase product from us. In terms of metered licensing or subscriptions and things like this. We're happy with Sven's team to look at your current implementation, how that's running today, what changes you might need to make to implement things like LDK as a service or cloud licensing, or to to look at hybrid type licensing schemes, which is using dongles and cloud and software licensing as well. And obviously we're here clearly to support you as well in terms of migrating to newer versions of LDK and any technical questions that you may have. So please reach out to myself or Sven. Our email address will be at the end, and would be happy to put you in touch with the right people, or get additional members of the team to get in touch and to run through your queries. So on to Q&A, I think, Sven. I think this is the last slide. Next one. Yeah. So there has been a few questions. I'm afraid most of them are technical and they're for you, Sven. So I shall start, and if you can answer, that would be great. So the first question is, how can you control the use of software-based licensing or software-based on cloud licensing and a VPN? How can we secure the use of the program by non-authorized parties, given when we use the VPN, then the IP is no longer necessarily the registered one? So follow that question?
By my wait a second. Control. Okay. The license manager is absolutely simple network protocol. So as soon as you want to introduce VPN, you can of course do it on top of that. On the other side, the security comes by the reducing of the amount of fingerprints. So I understand the license, the question like this. You want to avoid the identity sharing, yeah, that you hand out the ID to a real customer, and then this customers hand out it to friends or put it into the internet, and then you maybe receive thousands of logins with this single identity. Yeah, at this first version, we have the restriction that at a time only one login is allowed per identity. So this is a bit of security, and of course the ID is very hard to guess. So someone needs to hand out this license in a bad manner. And the third one, I already mentioned it, is binding the auto registration of the fingerprint. So if you want to secure it, then you simply allow only one or maybe two fingerprints auto-registered to the admin control center. I hope that does answer your question. If you want to add VPN, this is, of course, you are running the admin control center. If you want to have additional VPN, then go for it. We are fine with it. Everything is done by IP or on port 1947. No, this is all you need to know for the configurations and of the VPN. I hope this answers your questions. Do we have another one?
Okay. Yeah. So the next question is, I have a client who have several groups with independent licenses. Some of them are expired and some are still active. Does cloud licensing allow the client to use the licenses which are expired and the active, does the cloud licensing allow the client to use the licenses which are expired and active and have them work together, or do they stop since there are expired licenses in the system?
Each and every feature has own expiration date. So as soon as feature 1 is expired and feature 2 is still active, and you can still use it. Of course, this depends on how you checking for the licenses. Maybe you have a combination that you decide in your application that feature 1 and feature 2 must be available to work with your application. Then of course it's a problem. But this is no difference in cloud-based licensing or on-premise license, network or locally. Each and every feature is independent from an from the date. Has its own expiration date. So when a license is not valid anymore, it's expired. It's expired. It's no difference if it's cloud-based license or local license. I hope I understand the question correctly.
Okay, thank you, Sven. Third one here. So how do you handle different cloud end user licenses per customer? We have many customers who have many possible clients. If you had, a lot of cloud licenses, this might become, very difficult to manage with no oversight. So yeah, how do you handle different cloud end user licenses per customer?
This is planned for one of the next versions. This directly goes to the restrictions we have today that only one identity can be used at a time. We plan optional to say if you decide or if you configure identity A to a specific hardware or HASP ID, which has maybe then the 500 concurrencies, then yes, today you need to add 500 IDs, which is not very useful. I completely agree, but this is the first version. We will have in the future the option that you can then work in parallel with one ID to a specific HASP ID, and the limit is then the amount of concurrency. Not today. Please be patient. It will come in the next future. I don't know if it's the next version, but it will come very, very soon.
Okay, and then we've just got a couple more on specifically relating to Docker. So what license models can be used with Docker?
Depends on which you're using. Of course, if you have a separate license manager, then this is not reduced here. If you install a software license into a Docker container, our advice is to do this only with perpetual licenses. It is very easy to kind of reset the persistence in a Docker environment. This is the difficulty in a software license where we need to have the persistence, the information of the status of a license somehow on the system. And this is very easy to reset in a Docker environment. So Docker perpetual, or maybe with an expiration date. Our advice is not to provide a license with an amount of days or counting-based license in a Docker container. If this is your goal, then you need to enforce the customer to install a license outside of Docker, or to use the hardware key with the binding then to the USB port.
Okay, excellent. The second one on Docker is, can a license be deployed inside of a Docker container?
As I mentioned just right now, yes, it is possible, but it is not advised to do so because of the risk that it is hard to identify that a Docker container is cloned. That is the reason when we go back to where is it with our 3? I was too fast. Yeah. You now see the slide LDK support for Docker, right? And this is the option 3. You can, of course, install the license and the persistence in the Docker container, but our advice is to install the license manager or deliver the license manager as a Docker container, but then to store the license itself on the host. And this is what you're doing with this call here, that you kind of share the file systems from the host with the Docker container. This is our advice. You can install it in the Docker container, but then the risk to be resetted is high. Let's say it like this.
Okay.
Yeah, licensing is always how to say, a balance between flexibility and security.
It is very true. Okay, I've got 2 more questions that keep coming, which is great. Does LDK as a service make it possible to hand out and install a software license that's unique and only running on a specific standalone PC? i.e. once installed and run on one PC, it will not be possible that the customer can install and run the software on an additional PC.
Yes, this is our standard functionality of an
yes.
on-premise software license. Yeah, so a license is bound to a fingerprint, and so it is not possible to install this license file on a different machine.
Correct. Okay, thank you. The next, and I think the final question that we have is, how do you handle different cloud Can you run many cloud license instances on a server? Each client would connect to their own cloud address. Could we then have a better control per customer and keep this separate?
Wait a second. The problem is that we need to have the port 1947 for this request. So normally you can only point one port to one specific instance. So no, but what you can do is to have for each and every customer a separate HASP ID. So they are sharing one license manager with one URL, and yeah, then it's kind of a shared instance, and the separation between the ID from the customer is then the HASP ID.
Okay. Well, I think thank you, Sven. I think that's all of the questions asked. I don't think I've missed any. Thank you very much for joining. We're just about on time. As I say, we'll send out the recording link. It will probably be available on YouTube fairly soon, I suspect, and obviously the slides. And there's a number of hidden slides, as Sven mentioned, which goes into some detail around from the demo that Sven showed. And obviously, as I said before, if you need to get in touch, we're very happy to help in any way. So thank you very much. We'll end the webinar now, but thank you very much for your attendance, and we look forward to catching up with you all soon. Thank you again.
Thank you.